And the smart thing for me to do is be thank you very much and sit down. I'm a little worried. I might go downhill from that. But I mean, thank you for taking time out of your evening. It's people like yourselves and groups like yourselves that, one, give us that are elected hope, and also who hold us accountable. Because I know it can be difficult work in this political environment, where being a Democrat isn't necessarily considered to be the high end of the political spectrum, except for the things that we believe in, which are the things that working men and women desperately need. And so for you to take on this challenge, to fight for the values that we care so much about, to fight for the environment, to fight for education and funding, to fight for health care, and to fight for working men and women is truly a noble and responsible cause. And I want to thank you for spending your part of your evening with me here tonight. I represent the 35th Assembly District, which is Oxnard in the south, Ventura, and Santa Barbara. It's about 100 miles long, and when I travel my district, I go up to Santa Ynez, and they make some great wines up there. Come down to Carpinteria, they have cut flowers and chocolate. And when you get down to Oxnard, that's where 25% of every strawberry eaten in this country is raised. So when I bring all that back home and show it to my wife, she's one happy camper. I've done it. She thinks it's date night when I do that. But I was elected in '04, and I'm turned out in 2010. And sometimes you don't pick it, it picks you. And what happened the week after I first started in the assembly is I had the luck of cheetah slug in my district. So we lost 30 homes and 10 people died in that. And I came back to the district to try to be of help. And when I got back to Sacramento, Fabian Munoz, the speaker, said, because of your public safety background as a prosecutor in Fresno and Santa Barbara counties, and working with law enforcement and first responders, I want you to be the point person in the assembly on all of the issues having to do with emergency and disaster. So I chaired the Joint Committee on Emergency Services and Homeland Security, and after 2 years of struggling with the bill, we were successful in combining both the Office of Emergency Services, the Office of Homeland Security. We merged both of those departments. And if you've seen the trucks that say CalEMA, California Emergency Management Agency, that was my bill that caused that merger. Working with police, fire, other emergency personnel, we came up with an answer to who's in charge, because accountability is extremely important. So now we have, yes?
So California has its own Homeland Security Department?
Every state does.
But is it a section of the federal, or is it a state?
It was actually a paper agency created by executive order when the federal government had money for Homeland Security. For a state to be eligible to receive it, they had to have a state office of Homeland Security. Otherwise, there was nowhere to send the money. So the governor at the time, through executive order, created the Office of Homeland Security. It had a budget of about $300 million, federal monies, and it was, because it was executive order, it was a line item budget with a number, and that was it. No legislative oversight, no legislative control, no accountability. It was operated entirely out of the executive branch. And so they spent close to $800 million on questionable kinds of programs and projects, because there wasn't anybody who was in a position to make them stop. So when we merged the two agencies, that budget item now is fully explored and expanded. It's subject to legislative review, subject to legislative approval and recommendation. So we made a significant change in at least that part of the government. So I chaired the Joint Committee on Emergency Services, Homeland Security, which is now called the Joint Committee on Emergency Services. I sit on the Governor's Emergency Council, and I authored a fair amount of public safety legislation, in part because of my experience as a prosecutor, but also because of my working with first responders on those disaster issues. My legislative package also includes, I have a soft spot in my heart for cruelty prevention to animals. This year I authored 3 bills. All three got through the legislature and are onto the governor's desk. Los Angeles Times printed an editorial in support of the three bills. The Humane Society of the United States supports the three bills, and in fact today at 10 o'clock in the morning I learned that I have received the Humane Society endorsement for Attorney General for the state of California. The three bills, thank you, and I'm very, very proud of that. For the campaign, I've also been endorsed by the State Coalition of Probation Officers. I've been endorsed by the Ventura County Deputy Sheriffs. I have a recommendation for Tri-County Peace Officers Research Assistance Council as well. The Sheriff of Ventura County, who is a Republican, Bob Brooks, has endorsed me, as well as the Police Chief of Oxnard, the Police Chief of Ventura, and a whole host of individuals who have endorsed as law enforcement, and some other elected officials as well. My background and why I think I'm the best candidate for the Attorney General starts very, very long ago. It starts because of the stories that I learned from my family. My mother grew up in Colton, California. Anybody know where Colton, Southern California? And told me the stories about when she was a child growing up. There was one movie theater in town, and they had reserved seating for Mexicans. Because remember, they weren't Latinos, they weren't Hispanics, they weren't Mexican Americans. If you were a Mexican American in those days, you were a Mexican. And the Mexicans had in this theater the first 4 rows. It's the only place that they were allowed to sit in the theater, the first 4 rows. There were cities in California at about that time that had public swimming pools. You paid a nickel, a dime, or whatever, and the public could use, they call them plunges. I don't know if some of you remember those. In those cities, people of color were allowed to swim on Thursdays, and only Thursdays. And you know why? Because they drained the pool Thursday night, refilled it with fresh water and chlorine, and the rest of the community could swim Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursdays was again reserved for Latinos and African Americans. And I bring those stories up because as much progress as we have made, and the celebration that we feel with an African American as the President of the United States, there's still much more that needs to be done. Because I believe that the deprivation of a right to one is a deprivation of a right to all of us. And so California deserves an Attorney General who still has that history fresh in their mind, and who knows the kind of harm that it causes to a people to segregate those strictly on the basis that they are somehow different.